Hey everybody, this is Mike Bono from the North Andover Athletic Association, and you are listening to the Nightly News Podcast, the show that brings you inside the lines of North Andover High School athletics. Hi everyone, welcome to the Nightly News Podcast, sponsored by the North Andover Athletic Association. Sitting in as the host for Mike Bono, who is not here tonight, is myself, Al Purdy, and we have Dave Brown with me, fellow board member.
Thank you, Al. Good to be here.
Yeah. Our guest tonight is Kyle Wood, North Andover High School boys soccer coach. How are you, Kyle?
Good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, where you played, things like that?
Sure. So I grew up in a small town called Upton, Massachusetts. It's about an hour south from here. And my high school only had 3 sports. So we had soccer, we had basketball, and baseball. And I ended up playing all 3. Mm-hmm. I was decent at all 3, but it was a really small town. And right when I was about 11 years old is when club soccer started. And I got selected for a team. Actually, it was the team was based out of Pepperell. And so I kind of started my soccer club team at an early age. And I ended up playing at Westfield State. Okay. And then from Westfield, I got a job in Northbridge, Massachusetts, and I coached the girls' soccer team there for 4 years, and then I ended up here in North Andover, where I was lucky enough to get hired by Bill Tarbox as a freshman soccer coach. Yeah,
my son played freshman soccer.
Oh, yeah. And I did that for 10 years, and then when Bill retired, I was blessed and got that job.
And you're teaching in North Andover, right?
Yeah, so I'm at the middle school.
Great.
And what position were you when you were a college player?
I was a goalie.
Goalie?
Yeah.
All right.
I always thought I had, I thought I was when I was younger, I thought I was a really good field player, but I was also a better goalie. And so even though I begged my coaches to, make me or allow me to play on the field, I was always stuck in goal because, no matter what level. So even if it was like town soccer, blue versus yellow, and I just literally signed up just so I could play on the field, the coach would always put me in goal.
Well, you were tall. Were you tall?
I was tall. I was on the taller side, but and I just had good hands. I caught everything, So it lent to my basketball skills, but I still think I could have been a great field player. I'm terrible now. Terrible.
I think it's no secret North Andover High School soccer boys very strong for the last several years. Going back probably even 20.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the program, maybe your vision for the program, what you're looking for in an athlete, in a player?
It's funny. I need to reach out to Bill Tarbox, but I am guessing that North Andover High School has probably been in the state tournament for at least 30 years in a row. Right?
Wow.
Since I've been working here 25 years, we've always made it. So I know Bill had very successful teams earlier than that. So it could
be 35, right?
Could be 35, could be
right?
40.
Right.
Yeah. So I think a lot of that, I shouldn't say a lot. I should say mostly is thanks to the NASA program. Mm-hmm. And going back again 30 years, they had one of the first really successful programs for kids. Mm-hmm. And I'm constantly bumping into some people that said, 20 years ago, my daughter used to play soccer, and my husband was a coach, and that was 20 years ago.
I moved to town 22 years ago, and I didn't. My kids were tiny. My oldest was like 2, and I volunteered. And NASA was already well organized,
yeah,
and strong. And this was 1999.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, and back then, and they continue to develop players, and they have a lot of kids playing, and it just breeds success. Mm-hmm. So
no pressure.
I'm a great I'm a great benefactor of that. So yeah, it's a good place for me to be.
Sure.
How's the candidate pool for this season? You have 3 full teams, and
we have 3 full teams. We had close to 80 kids try out, and it's always challenging to make the team. We have a lot of skilled players. NASA usually keeps at least I think 2 or 3 travel teams. So you have some players that can play, and then on top of that, usually from 8th grade to 9th grade, they start growing. And so that, sometimes some kids edge out other kids that normally aren't as good. So, but going back to this year, we had, like I said, almost 80 kids try out. We are lucky enough to have 3 teams. We have a freshman team, a JV team, and a varsity team. But with 3 teams, you can only keep so many.
Sure.
So.
One of the things that always strikes me, my daughter played for Lisa.
Yeah.
And, the girls' game's physical, but standing there watching the boys' games, especially when you're down close, you realize how really physical it is. I mean, I think it's a lot more physical than basketball for sure.
Yeah. It is. And if you go to different leagues, the physicality is a little bit different around, where you play. And, it's just what it is. And the MVC tends to be a really physical, league.
Yep.
And if you're not prepared for that, you can lose to teams that aren't as skilled as you.
Sure.
Yeah, as a MVC referee, I can tell you that's the case. And it's tough because in high school, it's a 2-man crew. Right.
Yeah.
In college, it's 3. With a 2-man crew, you gotta be in the scrum,
sure.
Especially corner kicks. That's the worst.
Yeah.
Right. There's just this mass of bodies going for the ball.
Right.
And you got to watch for the elbows and watch for the,
Sure.
Yeah.
And the speed, you're seeing kids that are, 6'1", 185, and they're flying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it is a physical game, and it's you need to be very athletic. And there's a saying in soccer, speed kills, and so you got to be. So if you ask my players right now, so the first day of tryouts, we did something called the Cooper's test, and that is how far you can run in 12 minutes. And for the kids trying for varsity, I wanted them to get at least 7 laps, which isn't killer if you're like a track star or but for the most part, most kids can't do that. You know what I mean? Like you have to be fit. For my younger players, I said 6. But then the next day I did what we call a beep test, and that is a 20-meter run, and you have to get from one point to the other within a period of time, and as it progresses, it gets quicker and quicker and quicker and quicker. So, like professional athletes will get like around 150, 160, somewhere around there. It's impossible to actually beat the test. It's just physically impossible. But, I had a couple players that, got like 130.
Wow.
140. So, so then after we do those tests, of course, now we're doing strength conditioning, right? To stay healthy, working our hips. So you really got to be in great condition. And that's one of the things going into the season. In my pre-meeting that I talked to everyone, I said, heads up, we have a really strong schedule coming up. We don't have time to waste to get in shape. You need to be in shape. So here are, the parameters that you need to be in. Make sure you're there when first day. So it was tough. The last 3 days, every player that was out, gave it their all. Like it was a great effort.
Good to hear.
Yep.
One of my questions that I asked Lisa when we interviewed her, any issues with the club kids? Is it a struggle sometimes because you're coaching one way, one system, one thing, and they're like, well, my club coach wants me to do this.
I haven't had any of that. My experience has been a bit of the opposite, where I have a player that might take too many touches on the ball, and then they'll say, hey coach, guess what, my club coach told me I take too many touches on the ball. You know what I mean? Or they don't move to get open, and like, hey coach, my coach worked with me and said, you know,
Need
what
to get
do.
open.
Yeah. You know, move when you don't have the ball. So, with that all being said, am I a fan of club soccer? Yes and no. It's a lot of money, and you know, for some people spend so much money they could go on like a really nice vacation with their family. You know, and would I'd rather see that sometimes? Yeah.
We should do a podcast on just that topic.
Sure.
We
There
really
is,
should. Yeah.
and I want to apologize on behalf of soccer everywhere, because I feel like soccer, like again, when little Kyle Wood was 11, that was the only club, you know, sport you could play, right? And then you heard AAU, then AAU basketball came after that, shortly after that, and now I don't know if AAU basketball's still around, because I know there's so many different leagues and clubs.
Well, if there's something like it in every sport, and it can, I'm a little opinionated about that, but it can cause, let's put it this way, as fair as I can possibly be, it's as bad as it is good.
Sure.
That's the best it can be.
It's a real, it's tough. It's tough. It's a two, you know, like I grew up and I still believe in like 3 sport athletes, but you know, the day and age that we live in, it's really difficult. You know, it's really difficult, and
everybody does everything year round.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
It's funny. I remember saying to my wife that when we were contemplating moving back east from California, because we met in California, well, I don't know if I want to stay out here where you can do everything 12 months a year, because kids will be pressured to one sport 12 months a year. Guess what? It doesn't matter. They just move them indoors, right?
I know.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, I know there's the family negotiation that at least went on with us, because I coached softball for my daughter. My wife coached soccer, and you know, soccer always had that spring season.
Right.
And the rule was you're not missing a game of the in-season sport for a practice or a game.
Yeah.
You know, and that's just the way we did it.
That's how it should be, right?
Yeah.
And you know, it's tough. Like I understand how if your son or daughter loves one particular sport, they're gifted in it, and then they have these coaches saying, you know what, you could go to the next level, you could play here, or you know, and they get caught in it.
Sure.
You know, and next thing you know, you're driving to hockey practice at 4 a.m.
Right.
You know,
Right. Yep.
So I get it.
What do you? What's the outlook on the season? I mean, is it who's Central Andover? You guys probably the Iron.
You know, I hate answering this question.
Is it impossible to predict, basically?
It really is, because you just never know, right? You just never know, especially when you have like Central Catholic and they're getting these kids from, you know, not only all over, like not even our state, like New Hampshire as well. So it's tough. They had one of their better seasons last year. I imagine they're going to have another good season. Andover's always tough. But you know, Methuen, you know,
They've come a long way.
They have
pretty quick with Henry.
They played it. Yeah. They played us tough last year, and they were all sophomores, right? So they have to be better this year, you know. And they weren't bad last year. And then Bill Rick is always tough. Drake had, you know, not a great season last year, but they have such a good coach over there. I know they're going to be better this year. You know, it really is it's a tough league. But this year, our non-league games that we've picked up, they're all, you know, we have St. John's Shrewsbury, we have St. John's Prep.
Oh, that'll be a tough game.
Yeah, Acton Boxborough.
Wow.
And then Malden. So all top, you know, they're in the top 10, right?
Sure.
So, a few years, actually last year was strength of season.
Yep.
So we wanted to see how we do. So
We'll find out.
We'll find out. We'll find out.
Your advice for the 7th or 8th grader coming up to the high school who you know, wants to try out for soccer, wants to be a soccer player.
Yeah.
What do you think they should stress?
I really just want them to have fun. You know, it's nothing worse than you have a kid that's already burnt out, and just played. You know, I remember being a kid. You know, kids in my neighborhood wanted to play street hockey, and who doesn't like street hockey, right? Mm-hmm. But no, I had to go to like club soccer practice. You know what I mean? And like, so I'm going to play club soccer with these kids that don't really live near me. aren't in my neighborhood, and I get back and like they'd be telling like these battle stories about
The street hockey
the
game.
street hockey game, and I'm like, oh, I would love to have been there.
Parents should listen to that.
Yeah.
It seems like that doesn't happen. I mean, I probably played street hockey every day from the start of school till the weather got too bad in January, probably, right?
Yeah.
Played street hockey every day. Didn't play in high school.
Right.
Didn't play organized.
Yeah.
Now it seems like unless you play the sport for a team, you don't play the sport.
Yeah, that's another podcast.
Yeah.
I mean, I played stickball every day.
Yeah.
No wonder I became a good hitter, right?
Sure.
There needs to be more of that. But it's hard for parents, I think, now. It really is. They're afraid they're missing out, right?
Yeah, and exactly. And they want to do what's best for their kid.
Yeah.
And if you have someone that I don't know if the word is look up to, or, and you have someone saying, your son could really be something special. And of course you're going to find a way to pay that $1,500 or, because you want to do right by your kid. And I totally get that. And of course, and the kid, the same thing. They're like, "What? I can make this team?" And like, yeah.
Or they hear that their friend, little Johnny down the street, he's playing club. I want to play club.
Right.
Get that too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tough.
And there's a huge part of me that just wants kids to be kids.
Sure.
And as a phys ed teacher, I very much enjoy playing these sports that aren't soccer, that aren't basketball, that they've never played before. These different, unique games that no one's really great at, but they just have a fun.
Life sports.
Yeah, life sports.
Yeah.
And, and the other thing is when we were all kids, right, we would go out on, like a Saturday morning, we'd wake up like at 7, maybe even earlier than that, when we would play stickball or hockey.
Or touch football.
And there was no referee,
Yeah.
and we would get in loads of fights.
Mm-hmm.
We would argue, but we would figure it out. We would work it out.
Mm-hmm.
We would work it out.
Yep.
Exactly.
And and those are the days that I remember.
Mm-hmm.
I can't honestly remember. I can remember like maybe 1 or 2 club games that I played in, but I can vividly remember pick up basketball, and just going all like it was like dark, but it's got to win by 2. It's like 32 to 30, and you're like, no one's leaving until this is finished.
We're all in trouble, so let's just stay.
Right. And then like my dad would come in the car. He knew where I was, but I got that look. I'm like, oh, and then luckily I was like, hey, got to win by 2, and I remember my dad being like, all right. I get it.
For me, that was touch football at the churchyard, but it's same idea.
Right.
I was recently at a
touch football, but in quotes, by the way. There wasn't a lot of touch about it.
I was recently at a house in North Andover, a beautiful house, and I joked, but I was serious. I said, when I was growing up, I would have had to go to 4 different neighborhoods in my town to do all the activities that are in this yard.
In the yard.
Pool, basketball hoop. They had a pickleball. I'm like, legitimately, I'd have to go 4 different neighborhoods to get all those activities. So, it's much different today, obviously. So.
It is. But you know what? The summer fun program is kind of like that.
Yeah.
Which is why it's a great program,
Yeah.
and and they have the high school kids going down helping out. I mean, it's fabulous.
Yeah, I think that a big part of North Andover High School success and everything, I think, is a lot of they're good kids and they're giving back. That I look at the track program. There's 60 track athletes out there every Tuesday and Sunday, I think it is, and Thursday sometimes for the meets, coaching the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders in track, and those kids they look up to it. And then 5 years later, those kids are coaching. So it's pretty impressive.
I've got one for you since you have a strong program now, and it's not always been. There's not always been 80 candidates, right, for 3 teams.
We've
has it been strong for a long time?
It has. Yeah, we've since for a few, it has. I've usually 80 is around the number. 83, 85. Yeah.
So this has got to be the toughest thing for a coach. So you have to cut kids.
It's the worst.
It's the worst day of the year, right?
Not only that, I can't tell you as a human being how heartbreaking it is, because these are really good kids.
And they want to be there.
And they want to be there, and they're working hard, and they've been playing since they were 6, and all that.
So to go with that for a minute.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to guess you try to encourage them. Hey, try a different sport that maybe still has room.
Yeah.
And I know that See, one advantage private schools have, right, is they'll offer additional teams, right? Where
Right.
public schools can't do that,
Right.
Like a private school has 80 candidates, they make a second
Yeah.
thirds team, right? A second
Right.
freshman team or whatever they call it, right? And we can't do that. But do you have any ideas for how you can help those kids?
Well, we do have some sports like cross country, which is
No cut.
No cut. Yep. And track, of course.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we do, and I believe swimming. So there are activities out there that
You can encourage them to.
I can, if I'm being completely honest, and sometimes I will try to mention that, but sometimes when you're just looking at a kid in the eyes and you just are heartbroken that you have to have this discussion, it's a tough thing to say, like, by the way,
This is available.
yeah, you know what I mean? By the way, maybe try, track, or maybe try cross country.
Does it all fall on you as the varsity coach? Like when there's cuts, I know you probably don't cut freshmen, sophomores, but do all the cuts, are you the one who handles it?
The bottom line is it comes down to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder, this is just a wild idea I've had, because I know that high school has or high school age kids play, there's a 3-on-3 basketball league that they do at the youth center in the winter.
Yeah.
That consists of a lot of kids who wouldn't make the basketball team but
Right.
love basketball, right?
Yeah.
And I can't help but wonder if the turnout is that strong, it might be something, some sort of intramural thing like that might be worth trying to develop.
Well, NASA still they have teams that go
Right.
up to 18, so they can still play in the fall and the spring.
Because they do have a fall option for those kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
They
I
do.
didn't know that. Okay, that's well, that's something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Well, I don't have any more questions. It was great talking to you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I wish you the best of luck. I love
Thank you.
watching your team play. I think maybe we could reach out and figure out whether we're at 30, 35, 37 years of straight
Yeah, I'll have to
tournament
look
play.
into that.
Yeah.
No pressure
No,
on this
it's
coach
just-
to keep that going or anything
Oh,
like that.
geez, no. No. The good news is you're in the right place.
Yeah.
So,
Well, have a good season, Kyle. Good to
Thank
see
you.
you.
Appreciate
you.
it. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Nightly News Podcast, and hope you check into our future podcasts. Thanks again.